Hey, what's up everybody? It's Arluah here again with the last episode of the things I wish I knew while I was in the ICOC. So background on me, again, I'm a kingdom kid, meaning I grew up in the ICOC. So I've been in the kids ministry, I've been in the teens ministry, I went to teen camp, I did campus swap in campus, led lessons, I've done a sermon, I've seen different regions all over the East Coast. I was a Bible talk leader, I did encouragement dates, so just to give you kind of context of where this information is coming from. I was mainly in the Boston region. And so this video is directed particularly at the young men in the organization because that's who I most relate to. So I want to start this video off with this passage actually from a letter. It's called the Henry Kriete letter. It's this letter that came on in the 2008 that kind of made people lose trust in ICOC because it articulated a lot of things that people could feel but couldn't articulate. So I read through the letter. I highly recommend it. So in point number 26, Henry Kriete says, "So many thousands of men have been effectively emasculated by legalism and compliance to authoritarian leadership. Their dignity as men created in the image of God has been stifled. Their dreams and personal convictions and wildness of heart have been doused. All Christians, including brothers, must learn submission, of course. That is our glory. But the squelching of personal dreams, inner feelings, and convictions has had a demoralizing effect across the board. More than several men have lost their manhood." In light of that, I'd like to ask a few other questions, because the topic that he's referring to in terms of masculinity can be hard to identify, especially for those of us just in the world in general, but in ICOC as well, who don't have healthy, loving fathers in their life. I just want to ask you some questions to help you identify if you may struggle with these things. So, do you ever feel emotionally stunted or immature emotionally, especially after years of being in the organization? Are you struggling with a desire for adventure, a desire to produce, a desire to create, but every time you either initiate doing so in the ICOC, whether starting up a ministry or starting up a group or even starting up something for God, but that's unrelated or outside of ICOC, it gets either shut down by the ICOC or overly influenced by leadership in the ICOC? Do you feel like you're valued for more in the organization for what you do more than who you are and who you were created to be, like who you know you were created to be? Do you ever feel like you have more to offer that God's put inside you personally that you can use to help your community, your family, and the rest of the world, but that's been stifled because of your ICOC responsibilities or the messaging you're getting from the leadership in the ICOC, and you feel more like a caged lion? Have you ever felt incapable of making decisions on your own because of how the leadership's influence or your discipler's influence in your life? Maybe there's times you felt like you've seen other people offer advice to leadership or to someone in authority within the organization, and in terms of how to be more loving and more caring, just to give the leadership feedback, and it was met with either being shut down, ignored, guilted, pushed off, or shamed. Have you ever felt like some of the sermons from the leadership in the ICOC lack the love of the Father, but feel more like motivational speeches to get you to do more tasks or take care of more ICOC responsibilities? Do you feel like maybe the leadership loves the organization more than they love you? Maybe the leadership is only kind to you when they want something from you. And lastly, maybe you feel like you want to submit to leadership because of what the Bible says, but you are afraid, and because you or somebody you know has experienced being used by the leadership, and so you want to avoid that. All right, I know it's a scene change, but I just had to fill in some pieces that were missing from the original video just to make the rest of the video more cohesive. So if you had experienced any of the things that I was referencing in the questions beforehand, that strongly suggests that you've been through situations that have led to emasculating you. When I reflected on emasculation and what Henry Kriete was saying in that point he was making from his letter, it made me reflect on my experiences, and these were where the questions came from. Then I asked some friends that have been through the ICOC, and some of those were things that they had experienced. So if you have experienced some of the things I referenced in these questions, then the rest of this video will be helpful for you. If not, the rest of the video just won't be helpful for you. Okay, you may have been able to identify, I relate to some of the questions that were just referenced about emasculation. So why is it important? If I'm enjoying my time in the ICOC, I'm having fun, I'm meeting great people, I am serving, I'm a part of this ministry and this ministry, why should I care about being emasculated? Why it matters is because God really wants men to lead his church, his families, and the planet itself. But let's focus on families. God clearly says men are to be the head of the household, just as Christ is the head of the church. So it's kind of that same parallel of Christ and the church, men to the households. And so if you are a boy and you're not getting trained in how to be a man, you're not experiencing an environment that is empowering and pushing your masculinity, then you are lessening your chances for God to put you into a husband role, a father role. For men, we see a process of training, of building to get to that stage of masculinity. We see in Moses speaking to Joshua, he said, be strong and courageous. He's calling that masculinity out of him. We see in how Paul addresses Timothy. We see in Job, God says, brace yourself like a man. He's calling that masculinity out of him. Okay, and then some of you, and I know I would have said this if I was in the ICOC, some of you would say, oh, but it's okay. I have an ICOC discipler. Like, that's my mentor. That's my representation of the love of the Father in the absence of my godly father or my healthy father and things like that. So here's a challenge. What I've noticed as I've been outside the ICOC, gone to different churches, met different men, read more of the word, like got more in tune with God's heart. Here's the challenges I've seen. There's a difference between a godly mentor and a ICOC discipler. And I just want to list off some of those differences to you. And then most of them are in the context of a person who doesn't have a godly father in their life. So the goal of a ICOC discipler is to keep you showing up to ICOC events. Who gets put in ICOC leadership is structured for the benefit of the organization. While on the other hand, a godly mentor, their goal is to discover the gifts and talents that God gave to you. And it's like an adventure you guys go on together. And so that you can complete the purpose that God set for you, which sometimes might mean not being a leader in the ICOC or not being in a place where there is an ICOC. Like, God's mission for you might not have anything to do with the responsibilities of being ICOC. Another one, an ICOC discipler can easily pass you off to another discipler because the relationship is more transactional. It's not as relational. Godly mentor is more, knows the value of an exclusive one-to-one relationship. So they have no intention of passing you off. They desire to be with you for years and years to come. And they don't have to be like, they're not going to be like, oh, hey, check in with me. It's just like, they want to be. And so they'll be just available and present for you for years and years to come because they care about their relationship with you and seeing you grow and mature in your gifts and purpose for God. Another one, ICOC disciplers will track your harvest list. harvest list. You know, that means like how many people you baptizing, how many people you reaching out to, how many people you sharing your faith with, that kind of thing. With a godly mentor, the only concern for how much you are doing in your life is to see how you are doing in your life. I hope that makes sense. Like, I had a godly mentor ask me, you know, how are you doing with dating? Not for the purpose of being like, okay, you got to go on more dates, but for the purpose of finding out, you know, how am I feeling about myself? What are my internal beliefs? How are things going mentally for me and emotionally for me? Because and that leads me to my next one. A ICOC discipler cares more about your numbers and just checks in with you enough to make sure that your numbers are good. How many women are you taking on encouragement dates? How many Bible studies you're doing? A godly mentor will desires to know how you're doing, just about you, emotionally, spiritually. Hey, quick scene change. I just had to move somewhere else, but yeah, let's keep going back at it. So we're at the list of things that were the difference between the ICOC disciplers and the godly mentors. Another one of those being, a lot of times ICOC discipler wants to grow their ministry, but godly mentor wants to grow you and help you grow as much as you'll allow them. The ICOC discipler, the focus on growing the ministry, whether you are spiritually growing or not. They're pushing you to be inviting more people out, to be talking to more people, even if it's at the cost of, like, let's say you're in school. Like this, I heard this a lot from my campus peers. Or if you being in school was getting in the way of you like helping in leadership or helping in the ministry, they would strongly encourage you to, you know, drop school. Even if you're trying to level yourself up so you could help your family or help your future legacy and things like that, because it wasn't for quote unquote moving the kingdom forward, which is growing the ICOC, then that's what they would strongly encourage. Well, godly mentor is someone who's like, okay, this is what been put on your heart to do. All right, let's push that. If it's school, be in school. If it's a job, be in a job. Here's how to effectively be an ambassador of Christ in your job, regardless of your ability to go to a certain amount of Bible studies and a certain amount of meetings of the body. Like, just you meeting up with that godly mentor should be enough for them to be like, yo, this is your fulfillment of that verse in Ephesians about that goes like, don't forget to meet with each other. Because I know that verse can get used a lot to honestly manipulate people to go to more and more meetings of the body. An ICOC discipler looks forward to building a ministry using you, while godly mentor look forward to spending time with you personally. Whether they are in your ministry or not, like the godly mentor will try to spend time with you, get time with you, invite you over, be excited when you invite them over. Like the ICOC discipler will just, unfortunately, a lot of times only want to spend time with you for the purpose of either finding out your numbers, training you to be a leader, or putting on that front for the other members kind of thing. This one's important. Well, having an ICOC discipler sometimes will cost your mental health, and that will be disguised under, take up your cross, sacrifice. Like, even if it means sacrifice your mental health, godly mentor won't cost your mental health. It will help flourish it, if anything. Like, that's something they'll even check on because they care about you. ICOC discipler will point to the ICOC and maybe other leadership in the ICOC. The godly mentor will point to Jesus and keep pointing out how you can be more like Jesus. And there are more on the list, and I'll put a link to kind of a list that I've put together in the description. But the last one is ICOC disciplers are trained to, kind of like in a business or in a job, to spend more time and invest in those who are called Bearing the Most Fruit, which is, you know, bringing the most people out, inviting the most people, sharing the faith with the most people, which is a great business strategy. But they'll invest in those who are bearing the most fruit, and then if you're not bearing fruit, they'll just shift you off to somebody else, like whether they're qualified or not to help you mature. They'll just shift you off to that person. A godly mentor. The reason they care about your numbers is to care about you. So that's kind of some of the basics from the list. Let me know what you think. If you have other examples of having seen the differences, maybe you relate to some. I'd love to know how this information is hitting you. So my testimony in this, growing up in ICOC, I thought it was